lazyfluency podcast へようこそ。お互い英語と日本語を切り替えながらカジュアルな会話を通して皆さんと一緒に言語を学んでいきます。あやみです。
And I'm Joey.
そして今日のテーマは、居場所。その前にいいね、チャンネル登録、フォロー、また聞いているプラットフォームでレビューもお願いします。コーファイでのサポートもよろしく。それでは今日のテーマ、居場所。
Before we get into that, new monthly book club book is Bobobo Bobobo, the show I keep talking about in the main channel. And last week's topic inspiration, or one of them, about comedy. And yeah, if you're interested in reading Bobobo Bobobo, a comedy gag parody manga in English and or Japanese, jump in the link in the not the link in the Discord, the link to the Discord in the description of whatever platform you're listening on this.
Yeah.
And with that out of the way, the reason we're talking about Ibasho is when we saw the Bobo Bobobo show, it also involves going to Tokyo, but if you've seen the latest main channel video, and yes, I'm working on this incredibly long, over hour long, longest video on the channel, main channel video on the moment, which is why it's taking forever. But anyway, while we were there, if you've seen the end of that video, you know that there was a place that I frequented, a small town, and I went back to that town during this period of time, and made me think a lot about identity and the relationship identity has to the place you're in and the people you are around. But I want you to define, how would you define, this is a Japanese term, this is one of those terms that there are like, I'd say synonyms sort of in English. It's not as difficult as wabi-sabi or something. But I literally remember doing an assignment in college, being like, define Ibasho. And so to you, what is Ibasho?
そもそも英語でなんて言うの?
Well, okay, let's not worry about that. How do you define it in Japanese?
The definition ってこと?
Yeah, what is the definition of Ibasho?
Okay, in Japanese?
Yes, in Japanese, 日本語。
居場所というのはですね、あなたが心地よいと感じる場所、そしてそれにしとこう。
Just feel good, a place you feel good. I think it's a little more than that. My understanding of Ibasho.
You feel comfortable.
Is it's a place where you feel you belong. That's how it's constantly.
まあ、属す。日本語で言うと何？
居場所。
そっか。That's a whole conversation.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, so that's one of the ways you commonly hear talked about. It's like this long sentence, a place you feel belongs. A home in some contexts works, but it's not necessarily a home. And it's not necessarily also a physical like building or even country. And this conversation specifically said going back to, it wasn't my hometown necessarily in Japan. When I studied abroad in Japan, I studied abroad in Kyoto first. And then, I've traveled a bunch of places in Japan, but this other small town was the other place I lived for like a longer period of time. Obviously, now I'm in and out of Okinawa. And in general, my life has been a whole sequence of moving a whole bunch. So I think maybe I've mentioned this on the podcast, maybe I have not. But before I entered high school, I had changed schools 7 times and going between, Panama and the United States frequently. So I feel, compared to many people, that I don't have as strong of an attachment to having a very concrete like ibasho or place I belong. In terms of country, we'll talk about other forms of ibasho, and I'm kind of wondering, what are the ups and downsides of that, and how, like, what actually is my ibasho to myself given my constantly changing personality. Some other things that were also triggering this discussion I'm interested in is New York. I don't follow sports, but New York had it was a really big deal. They had a team that the entire, what's it called? I don't know if it's a state or just New York City, like kind of roots behind, called the Knicks, and they won like the NBA championships. And there's this whole thing about, what makes a New Yorker, if you're not born in New York, are you still a New Yorker? But you saw the entire city rally around a single thing. And I realized my entire personality has basically been not anti like that way, but I just have no sense of, I don't know if community is the wrong word, but at least I was saying like identity based.
まあ、流動的でいいんじゃない?
Like something being fluid. Well, for one, I'm wondering, do you have a very similar situation, although you've been in one spot, but like I said, your family's roots are elsewhere. I'm wondering, how is your relationship with the idea of ibasho, and do you have like places that you consider to be in that?
結構居場所なかったな。なんか、居場所でちょっと追加したい定義としては、あれじゃない。自分が心地いい っていうプラス、あとその周りが自分を受け入れてくれるみたいな、そういう感じもあるから、
Well, including that, do you have what's it called? Do you feel like you've had, or like what? Yeah, do you feel like you've had one at some points and not had one at some points?
いや、小学校の時は結構楽しかったから、居場所はあったんかな。けど、中学、高校、大学はちょっとっていう感じ。で、多分合わないっていうか、合わなかったんだろうね。やっぱ小学校ってさ、同じ地域に住んでるし、私は公立の小学校に、パブリックの普通のね、そこら辺の小学校行って、で、いろんな人がいるじゃん。やっぱ家庭環境も違くて、で、ちょっと古着の洋服でちょっと破れたのしか着させてもらえない人とかもいたし、将来暴走族になるのが夢、なんでかっていうと、親が暴走族だからっていう人も全然いて、その子とも普通に友達だったりして、ちっちゃい頃ってそういうね、いろんな人と友達になれるし、あと、多分自分自身がさ、まだ、一人の人間としてまだ発展途中だから、多分、言葉ちょっと違うかもしれないけど、区別っていうか、差別じゃないけど、区別っていうのをしない年代であるから、そう言ってみんな仲良くできんだなと思って。で、私そういう環境結構好きだったんだけど、
You're focusing around like the community aspect, which I want to get to in a second, but I'm curious. But you'd feel no attachment. For example, I think New Yorkers feel attachment to maybe New York. Actually, I don't know. I don't know if New Yorkers like New Yorkers necessarily like New Yorkers. They just respect them as New Yorkers, but they like New York. Obviously, the people make the place as well. But I'm wondering, you don't have like a location where you're there. I want to talk about communalism, but I'm just wondering. I think a lot of Japanese people would definitely say, like, whether they know it or not, Japan, pretty much anywhere, would be a form of ibasho. It's like their safety blanket. Like they go somewhere, they come back to Japan, it's like, this feels right to be here.
よくあるよね、日本の人が、どっか旅行行って帰ってくると、日本だ、やった、みたいな。やっと戻れるみたいな、私、それこそね、居場所っていう感じしてる人もいるかなと思うけど、そういった意味では、今沖縄住んでて、で、どっかね、旅行とか、普通に、で行って、で、戻ってきた時に、沖縄の空港戻ってくると、戻ってきたみたいな感じはあるから、そういう意味で、私は、そうね、大学にいる頃よりかは、今の沖縄の方が心地いい感じするから、家族はマジで、沖縄に一切いるわけじゃないんだけど、そういった意味で居場所っていうか、心地がいい。
But that was like a recent thing. Before that, you don't think you had like a location, any sort of place?
そうね、だってずっと同じ。
Well, for most people, I'd say being in this is what I was going to say. So I think for most people, being in that same consistent place and environment is like what creates the, obviously the sense of home or the sense of ibasho. For me, in terms of location, I think that's the one where it was very tricky because I moved so much. And if anything, in terms of if you're defining it like just if you feel good and you feel like things are normal, then I would definitely say Japan is more that than any place I've been. But the other thing is, I don't feel necessarily one with the general community. And we'll get to jump into here in any place I've ever been. And that's partially because they're moving a lot. And it's also partially because of the very, not just like the, surface level appearances and how I dress myself. Like, so we talked about that episode, like, yeah, I can look Panamanian sort of, but if you put me around Panamanians and with the context and my cultural background, I definitely stick out. And same thing in Idaho and then same thing in Japan. But also in terms of my self-identity, because I've moved around so many places, like not only other people looking at me and going like, oh, there's something slightly different at me, something slightly different at you. Because I've always been moving around different places, the way I also perceive myself is also not associated with one like people or place. And I think we talked about maybe this in other episodes, but I also had a thing where I've always been on this line of never really jumping. Like I engage in a lot of activities but I don't tend to like center my personality around one activity. In Japan, this is pretty common. Like if you join a club, I don't think right, we talked about they don't allow you to join other clubs, right? If you join like a sports club, a lot of times you have to commit to that. In the US, it's not like that. So I played, I mean, I could list them up. I played like at this point 12, like in official like club settings, like over 11 different sports, and for like multiple years. And I've also like ran a strategy and games club, which is like very on the nerdy side. And so I always had my hands in a bunch of things. I never felt really committed to one thing, which there's upsides of that. But I think the downside is I felt like I'm constantly in this state of being around people, but not being in like the center of different communities. And I'm wondering, I guess with that, you were talking a little about community within elementary school. But, and to be clear, I'm not necessarily saying this is a bad thing. I'm saying regarding this idea of Ibasho in terms of community, I don't know necessarily if I've ever felt that as much. So I'm wondering, I guess on your perspective, you were saying that in terms of place, recently Okinawa, but in terms of when you felt that you had more of a strong community, that would be during elementary school?
コミュニティ。そうだね。コミュニティだな、場所。その場所にあるコミュニティで自分が、属するところがあれば、それがもちろんね、居場所って感じはするから、確かに言われてみれば、中学、高校、大学で、コミュニティはちょっとあったけど、そんなに活動的ではないっていうか、だし、中高、陸上部は入ってたけど、俺はメンバーとか、なんか上のその顧問の先生、コーチっていうの、コーチっていうコーチでもないけどね。
I guess you should explain it real quick. It's a little weird thing, so I mean you can.
そうだね。
Yeah, that's not
なんかね、
American.
中学
You have a different. So I mean, most just Americans, you know. But yeah, in the U.S., if you do a sport, you have a coach for the sport.
こっちの中学高校、たまに大学も、例えばじゃあ陸上部だとするじゃん。で、陸上部にコーチがつくと思うじゃん。そのプロフェッショナルな。いや、実は普通の先生っていうね。私の場合は英語の先生だったっていう。でも大体、先生が配属されるときには、その先生が、昔、若い時に何部だったよとか、結構多分得意なスポーツ、があって、その部活に所属させられるのかな？そうそうそう。だから普通に知識はあるし、メニューとかもね、組んだりとかもするしっていう感じで、っていうのが仕組み。で、
Always reminded me of the dangerous katakana menu. Menu being like a training program for.
メニューだ、メニュー。
For those, and then I was talking about versus the one you eat.
そうそう。普通、イートはメニューだけど、スポーツの、何をするよっていうのがメニューって言うんだけど、いいや、それ置いといて何の話だっけ。そうそう。で、その顧問の先生とあんまり反りが合わなくて、みたいな。で、だから、一応そうね、陸上部に所属したけど、なんて言うんだろう。あんまり、自分が心地いい感情をしてなかったからっていう感じかな。で、
Okay. What about, as a doctor? Because this is one of the things I think, you actually, one of the reasons that I mean, you kind of, I kind of decided this topic, and then I realized that you were actually speaking about something related to this topic, which is the fact that communicating with doctors is difficult in the sense that.
多分ね、これで私のせいなんで。
Well, okay, well, from my perspective, you can tell, you're obviously your perspective of the doctor, but as an outsider, to me, it seems like most doctors, this applies to a lot of jobs in Japan, where and jobs in general in the United States, although I would still say in America, it is now the trend, I think, much more. People don't really associate them as strongly with their job. They're just trying to get by. People switch jobs all the time. They switch companies all the time. Japan's historically not been that way, where you kind of devote yourself to a job or literally a family. Like, if you're I had it noted here because I was obviously talking about Akane Banashi, which I will keep pitching until more people see it. The Rakugo show where you kind of get trained under a specific mentor and it has a family name. And so your entire identity is directly tied to your craft or job or whatever. You can think somebody who works in Nintendo. There's all the senior management at Nintendo worked there from the very beginning, basically, and they're slowly retiring. But and doctors are kind of like that as well. And the problem being if you're like that and you're like Ayumi, who has very many interests, a lot of these doctors, it's like their interest and their job is the same thing.
Do I?
Well, just put that aside.
Okay.
You can talk about it as well. I think comparative to most people, you do, in Japan at least. From my perspective, it looks like, how does one make conversation if you talk about your job, you're already at your job, and that could feel like annoying. Like, it's like, hey, bro, we're working. But you also don't want to feel like you're difficult to talk to. But I guess, I don't know, what from your perspective, what is the...
まあそうね、その日本って少なくともさ、なんて言うんだろうね。年配じゃないか、その自分より上の人をなんか敬うと、敬うのが、リスペクトね、するのがやっぱり風習だからさ。なんか私にとっては、同期、自分と同じ年代の人たちとトークするように、上の人とトークはできないし、で、それはもちろんその口調であったりね、口調だとか、あと話の内容とか、そうだから、なんか話すことがないんだよね。
Yeah, and obviously just so people know, Ayumi's forced in these situations. In the US, this is not really common at all. But remember, you have to go to events, and you kind of have to in quotations. But I don't think you haven't mentioned as much recently as maybe it's because we'll talk about the middle section, but maybe it's because you're visiting a different hospital or something.
とかさ、ボードゲームのね、コミュニティとか行ったりしても、そこでボードゲームはするけど、例えば5人ぐらいいたとして、じゃあ他の4人に、何の仕事してるんですかとか、普段趣味他何してる？趣味はちょっと聞いたりするか。なんか、あんまり、なんていうの、他の人の、どういう人なのかって分かんないまま、とりあえずボードゲームするみたいな。なんか、そういった雰囲気もある気がする。あんまり、その人間がどういう人間なのか知らずに、ただただ一つの目標をみんなでやるみたいな。
That's the weird thing I found about Japanese style community making is, to me, it feels, I'm not saying people can't be friends. I think people find friends within these situations, but when Americans click, like they form a clique, and maybe there's some context where it comes in Japan, but I'm just saying from my experience, cliques, they have a very strong sense of identity tied to the clique and the thing, but there's always a level of separation where it talks about the personal self, like in whatever. In the United States, it's not only that you are like friends with inside that specific community. It's like you're you're very, very close. You recently saw Dead Poet Society. Oh no, did I? No, that was me who saw it. Have you seen Dead Poet Society?
What?
It's a movie with Robin Williams. You don't have to see it. It's fine. I don't think you've probably seen it. Dead Poet Society.
デッドプールじゃないか。
No. But basically, like you kind of get this environment where it's like you know everything about each other, and you have this very tight, close-knit community. But at least Mike said, once again, my experience to the degree I've interacted with a bunch of different small niches in Japan, it's like they're very tight inside this specific context, but you don't really know much about each other, like at all. And we've talked about that in previous episodes. But something I do want to talk about in terms of, there's two more questions I have, which is one, what is having a sense of, because Ibasho is tied closely to identity. I feel like I'm not saying that they're necessarily the same thing, but I've been thinking like, how important is this really? Like, how am I actually feeling about it, realizing that I don't know by the typical definition I have one? And the second thing I'm a little curious about is how much this is specifically tied to like this formative years when you're like very young and the place you're living to. Obviously, in terms of, maybe people don't know, and I don't actually know if I explicitly mentioned on the podcast, but although I sound like a very American English speaker, I actually moved to the United States. It was a little more complicated, but when I was 8, because of the fact I was unable to communicate in English with my dad, you might be thinking, why couldn't your dad speak Spanish? Why does he not learn Spanish? He's terrible at language learning. So one of the reasons I moved to the United States, my family did, is because I was no longer able to communicate to my dad specifically because my English levels were not good enough, apparently. So at one point,
not good enough.
At one point, I was a very Panamanian Spanish-speaking boy, and I think a lot of people would say that this New York conversation. Well, if you're not born in New York, you're not in New York. You don't have the same vibes. Your formative years were there. But my formative years, I mean, if you want to define them, before the age of 8, were not in the United States yet. I definitely think most people would consider me very American. Obviously, after that, it was in the United States. But I don't know. Do you feel like your like formative years? Do you feel like people identify, like you give traits clearly from where you lived initially, or that kind of experience?
いや、まあ、ね。わしの名字もあれだし、まあ、
Well, it's not connected to you. I'm talking about like
ところ
based on where you present yourself. I'm not talking about, you can always look at your skit or whatever and I'm saying how you present yourself. Like I was talking the New Yorker argument. Like let's say Tokyo. Let's say I don't know if there's this dynamic in Japan, but I feel like maybe there is. Where if somebody's from Tokyo, but if they're born in Tokyo, but if they come later after Tokyo, are they not Tokyoites? Is there
出身地を聞くときってこと?
Yeah. Are you familiar with the New Yorker thing? It's like, you can't, a lot of
some original New Yorker じゃないとダメみたいな。
Yeah, like you're not born in New York. No, I'm saying, is there any prefecture that has that? I feel like.
なんじゃない？だから都会は結構あるよ。東京とか、まあ横浜とか、あと、大阪とかもさ、
Okinawa. What I'm forgetting, Okinawa, of course. I think Okinawa has a very strong sense of identity because because of the historical. Well, for one, Okinawans actually do, for reasons I've looked into this, but Okinawans do make it like in surveys. They do clearly define a line between themselves and like mainland Japan.
結構上の人はそうだね。おじいちゃんおばあちゃん世代。
But it sounds like you're saying you don't actually feel as much of a strong, like in the United States, I'll say it's a really big thing. You're from Texas, that's a really big thing. You're from New York, you're Californian. Oh, this because you're Californian. 関西と関東はバーサスはあるんじゃない? Well, I'm asking if you, well then in your case, do you think you're giving off those vibes? Your formative years were one place.
結構こっち、沖縄来てからは、なんかやっぱり、トーンが違うね。トーンっていうか、声のトーンじゃなくて、イントネーションか。イントネーションが違うねって言われて、ごめん、ちょっと関東だから、つって、そう。だから喋り方でわかるっていうね、そう。
I guess then you're saying it does not necessarily, because the thing that from my perspective is somebody who I don't think is a clear Ibasho. I was kind of noticing like and this is probably more and more in cases you grow up, either A, the community you're in kind of falls apart because naturally friendships fall apart and you kind of end up by yourself, or B, like you're in a situation where from the outside, because I'm always just putting like, my self-identity is kind of tied very specific to the current moment and state. It's like, if I'm really into this thing, then maybe I have a stronger fixation, but my whole, identity isn't there. You're saying you keep talking about you come to Okinawa and then you can see your accent change, but we're not talking about like, I don't know if you identify as Okinawan necessarily in that sense. So anyway, let us know what your thoughts are on Ibasho, if you have a specific place to Ibasho. And I'm very curious in terms of the born in thing, like we can just use New Yorker as the example, but how important do you think your formative years are in terms of self-identity? Obviously let's ignore like your physical appearances. I think that, you can't change that, but yeah, let us know. And we're back with the final section. And you made to the final section. That means send an email to lazyfluency@gmail.com with a comment, question, language related, and or otherwise. And this was supposed to be a full episode once again, but I keep saying this, but if you're wondering, it's like, are you guys trying to remove the middle section? What are you trying to do? IME has no guaranteed free days off, so it makes this situation where we only have a very little amount of time, and we just we're kind of like 5 minutes short from being able to have enough time to record the middle section. Which is to say, this week, I think this was a comment. I think this was a YouTube comment from Sarah. It might have been another platform. And this was regarding our cultural taboos about time and being punctual.
Last episode?
The one before the last.
Oh, okay.
And it goes as follows. I'm a very punctual person here in the States, but none of my friends are. We invited friends over yesterday, and all 3 families were at least 45 minutes late. In Japan, we were late everywhere because we were trying to navigate with people, and it was super stressful for me. Thank you for the comment. And the reason I specifically chose this comment.
I think your family, like all, 3? Three families.
I don't think she's specified. Oh, all three families were.
All three families are from Okinawa.
I will say, ever since we did talk about that, I've become even more, I guess, aware of whether you are from. Oh, we just literally first. I mean, the main topic. Identity changes and influences. I think for everybody, it's constantly fluctuating, but I think obviously some people do have a stronger attachment to some specific part of their life. But I'm saying in the Okinawa effect, I felt it very strong. Regardless of where you came from, when you come to Okinawa, you start slipping. I think it's because with being punctual, I think you'd probably do a scientific thing on this. Once someone lets you in Tokyo, people don't let you slip. You slip up. You get like some sort of social backlash or actual backlash. In Okinawa, it's like what is it? You give a cat. No, not give a cat food. This would be like you give your kid a sweet without him doing something or without finishing his homework, and the next day he comes and he wants a sweet before he does his homework, and he wants two sweets. I'm just saying like Okinawa lets you slip. You're late by a limit. You're late by a minute. Yeah, you're late by a minute, and they go. No one got mad at me. Then you're late by 2 minutes and then 3 minutes. But
そんなちまちま遅れないよ。
Yeah. But what I was saying, the reason I chose this comment actually was because I relate to it very much, especially in the second half. And especially when dealing with elderly in Japan, or not elderly, but I'm just saying anybody who's not familiar with Japan, if you are familiar with Japan, you're probably by default the guy who's going to have to guide everywhere around. And I think to a degree, what the Japanese person does when they have foreigners, and then the foreigner, when you're the foreigner yourself, you get a pass, and you do get a pass. And even if you didn't get a pass, you wouldn't be able to internalize the fact that you're being like criticized and thought badly of when you're doing foreigner things. And maybe to a degree, I mean, not now. Current Japan, no. There's a lot of animosity. But maybe in the past, a lot of Japanese people would go, you know what? I'm happy there's a foreigner. It's fine that they're messing around. But when you're the Japanese person, or in this case, the one in charge with guiding your friends in Japan, it is extremely like one-on-one. I find it's not not bad, but just there's a good chance that anybody listening to this podcast is going to be aware enough not to be a burden. But I'm just saying, like, I found this to be a very, very, very stressful and like mind-racking experience where like it's already enough when to make sure like you're keeping yourself in check. But keeping a larger group, 3, 4, 5, 3 families, I could only imagine in Japan sounds miserable.
まああれだね。なんだっけ。Don't fall far from the tree みたいな。
The apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
そう。
Well, in what sense? Are you saying that Sarah actually...
It runs in the family.
Are you saying that... what's the largest amount of like foreigners you've had to guide in Japan?
Foreigner...
The largest amount of foreigners you've had to guide, be their tour guide in Japan?
3 people.
How was that?
いや、あれはまあ特殊だったからだ。私、フリータイムあんまりないけど、ガイドしてって言われて。
No, I'm saying, how was the guiding experience?
だからそれで、だから私そんな、ね、旅行の場所知らないよって言って、なんか全部任せっきりにされたのはちょっとあれだったなっていう。
Oh yeah, well that also happens too.
Yeah.
But it was called, okay, it sounds like you do, so you do enjoy the experience, you don't enjoy the experience?
Yeah.
I've enjoyed the experience where I'm the tour guide when I have similar interest or even overlapping interest, which you should think is pretty high, but sometimes it's more of a problem. If somebody has interest, I tend to overlap. It's the problem when somebody's in Japan for reasons related to family. Like they wouldn't choose Japan on their own. They just happen to be in Japan. And I've been in that situation a couple times. And I hate that. I very much don't know what to do. Or like, this has not happened yet, but I keep thinking in my mind, I mean, it probably will happen at some point that my parents at some point will probably come visit Japan. And I really just dread this idea of having to bring some Japan and have this American going, why do you do it that way? Like very loudly in train, or like, you know, when everybody's quiet train, and then like ayete, like, you know, he'll like go out of his way to be a nuisance. I'm hoping that didn't happen with three I'm not sure if you're American, Sarah, but 3 American families being routed to Japan sounds like the plot of a movie. You know what I'm saying? like a more intense version of Meet the Parents or something. Yeah. But yeah, thank you for the comment. That bell means we reached the end of today's episode. Thanks for joining us on the lazy conversation towards fluency. If you have any language-related questions and are just looking for general advice, send an email to lazyfluency@gmail.com and we might respond in the next episode. Also, consider supporting us on Ko-Fi to get video updates, Discord access, and or just lend a hand. And finally, make sure to check out our podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and more. We'd appreciate the support. This has been Joey
and Ayami
signing off. Janet.